Magandang araw po sa ating lahat, Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao, pati na rin mga OFW sa buong mundo. Magandang araw po sa inyong lahat. Doon po sa mga sumusuporta sa aking mga reaction video na kagaya nito, maraming salamat po. Mag-follow po sa aking channel, sa aking mga reaction video na kagaya nito. At huwag na po natin patagalin, sabay-sabay po natin pakinggan at panoorin.
Reply, Mr. President, kaya nga po tayo nagbibigay ng ngipin sa pagbibigay ng rekomendasyon na mayroong maimbestigahan at parusahan para patunayan sa ating mga kababayan na hindi naman tayo nagiging lax sa ating oversight function at meron pa rin batas na dapat sundin. Kung lahat po ay tayo ay maaawa at patatawarin na lang natin lahat, ay wag na po tayong baka pumayag si Senator De La Rosa na dating Bucor, tanggalin na yung mga padlock sa piitan. Kaawaan na natin lahat. So, kailangan po yung dapat parusahan.
Misplaced, Mr. President, if that was my question. Pero hindi po yun ang tanong ko. I understand what the good chair has said, that it is the court who would make such a finding. Nga lamang po, this representation, bilang hindi po ako abogado, ay tinatanong ko lang po yung legal opinion ng good chair. Is good faith a defense in criminal, hindi sa harap ng blue ribbon, in criminal prosecutions for usurpation of official functions? Depensa po ba yung good faith or hindi po, Mr. Chair?
It can be used, Mr. President, as a defense, but then again, the act of usurpation of authority, again, I go back to the novel term I mentioned last night, refers to the act of knowingly and falsely representing oneself as an officer with an authority to sign. So, knowingly, that is the scienter. There is an intent, Mr. President. So, if you have a defense of good faith, you have to show that you signed that without that knowingly. So, how can you do that? When you sign, your affixation of the signature is a known positive act, an overt act of doing something to claim that position. I don't want to belabor that point, but if Yusek Sebastian or the other persons would want to utilize the defense of good faith, nothing will prevent them from so doing.
Salamat, Mr. President, good chair. Siyempre, kung knowingly at falsely minirepresent ang sarili, kontra doon yung good faith defense na sinabi naman po ng chair, it can be used. It can be used, and knowing that you don't have the authority, not knowing that you signed. So yung sapat na po sa akin, Mr. President, na sinabi ng chair na good faith can be used, as the good chair said, can be used as a defense in criminal prosecution. And like I said also earlier, Mr. President, good chair, I will not debate the factual question of whether or not Yusek Sebastian had criminal intent. Malinaw po sa aking isip, although others may of course disagree, that just taking all the circumstances together, the fact that there was a July 15, 2022 memorandum granting him authority to sign, the fact that there was no opposition from the executive to import 300,000 metric tons of sugar when it was first broached, and the fact that the SRA board is a collegial body and the signature of the DA secretary is actually technically not required to issue a sugar order, there is enough to sustain a finding of good faith. Ang mahalaga lang po talaga sa akin, Mr. President, ay nasabi po ng good chair at nailagay po natin on the record that indeed good faith is a defense in Article 177 of the revised Penal Code. Yes, Mr. President.
Just point of order. Can we have that slide replaced, because people might misconstrue that as the one being acted upon. There's a slide posted here which has been there for the last 30 minutes or so, Mr. President. Thank you to the Secretariat. Mr. President, to clarify it once and for all. It can be a defense. However, when all the elements of the offense under Article 177 are present, good faith is negated. So there are 4 elements under 177. Offender may be a private or public officer. Pasok. Offender performs any act pertaining to a person, authority, or public officer of the Philippine government or any of its agencies or foreign government. Pasok. Number 3, offender performs the act under the pretense of public function. Hazy. Number 4, offender performs the act without being legally entitled to do so. Dito po sa number 4, siguro po kinulang yung 4th element, so good faith can be negated. Mr. President, ang dami po nating testigo noon, kabilang po yung dating executive secretary, na sinasabi naman niya, hindi naman talaga siya, bagamat nandun sa Memorandum 15, yung pagpirma niyang yon ay hindi siya inauthorize pa ng executive. Ganon din po yung perception ni na Mr. Serafica at ni na Mr. Valderrama at Attorney Beltran na ang akala nila ay authorized nga, kaya nagpirmahan din sila. So, the elements, all the elements should be present, but here we have element 3 and 4 which are on the borderline. So, good faith can be negated, Mr. President.
Mr. President, good sponsor. Well, I see the majority leader maybe approaching. But for the record, before this may be suspended for today, Mr. President, good sponsor. For the record, akala ko hindi po lilitisin tulad ng isang korte. Wag naman po sana po ang aking hiling, wag naman po sana nating sabihin na good faith can be negated. Minsan po, kapag po yung mga posibleng inosente ay inaakusahan ng mga krimen na posibleng hindi naman nila ginawa, minsan po, Mr. President, good faith na lang yung huling depensa nila. At wag naman po sana nating ipagkait yon sa kanila dahil nga sabi ng good share din, Mr. President, hindi po tayo korte. Sapat na po sana iwan natin na good, yung sinabi po ng chair kanina na aking ipinagpapasalamat na good faith can be used as a defense dito sa Article 177 ng revised Penal Code. As I said a few times, Mr. President, in the course of this initial interpellation, I'm not a lawyer, so I do not wish to belabor these legal points, but I do this because of a more critical point I'd like to make as an advocate for Filipino consumers and Filipino workers. This disproportionately punitive response by the executive against civil servants like Yusek Sebastian produces a chilling effect and discourages officials from acting with dispatch on issues as critical as prices and supply of important household commodities. At pag ganito po, Mr. President, ang talo po dito ang mamamayang Pilipino. Mr. President, good sponsor.
Mr. President, just a quick reaction that the element number 4 never came from me. It's part of People versus Uy, GR 248566, August 4, 2021, a decision of the Philippine Supreme Court, Mr. President. And I, as an additional reply, Mr. President, kaya nga po tayo nagbibigay ng ngipin sa pagbibigay ng rekomendasyon na mayroong maimbestigahan at parusahan para patunayan sa ating mga kababayan na hindi naman tayo nagiging lax sa ating oversight function at meron pa rin batas na dapat sundin. Kung lahat po ay tayo ay maaawa at patatawarin na lang natin lahat, ay wag na po tayong baka pumayag si Senator De La Rosa na dating Bucor, tanggalin na yung mga padlock sa piitan. Kaawaan na natin lahat. So, kailangan po yung dapat parusahan.
Mr. President, good.
Yes, Senator Risa.
Yes, Mr. President, salamat po. So, no quarrel with remedial measures to prevent corruption. That's not part of my interpellation because we in the minority agree with those. Yung kapag pwede na pong mag-resume ng interpellation later on, isusulong ko pa rin na yung certain points of the committee report, kaya kami naglabas ng minority report that have to do with what we believe are the badges of good faith of the people who stand accused in the majority report. Salamat po, Mr. President. Good sponsor.
Before we wrap up, Mr. President, the discussion on this matter, I just need to react to the the comments of the sponsor. He's taking it against the minority that we participated in the investigation.
No.
Hindi dapat ganun. I mean, binabanggit po yung na nag-participate kami pa nagpasabpina, kami pa nagtatanong kami. Mabuti nga nagpa-participate ang minority. Ang aming point is, if after the hearing, there is nothing there, don't fault us if we see nothing there, because there's nothing there. That is the approach of the minority report, Mr. President. So, don't tell us that nag-participate kayo, then therefore there must be something there. There is nothing there. So, yan lang po yung I hope that the sponsor also took the time to read the minority report, just
Yes.
as we took the time to read the majority report.
Yes, we...
So, ganoon lang po yun. And I hope, because magkakaroon po ng chilling effect kasi yun. Kung papatulan namin yung nasabi po ng ating chairman sa future Senate Blue Ribbon investigations, mananahimik kami because we are afraid that we might disagree with the conclusion. Hindi po, we will continue. We should be allowed to participate. You should encourage our participation and not use it against us in case we disagree with the majority report. Because yun lang po yun, basta all we are trying to say, or part of what we're trying to say in the minority report is, as far as criminal liability is concerned, or the recommendation on criminal liability or on a further investigation, we participated in the hearings, we listened, we looked at all the evidence. Our conclusion is there's nothing there. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. President, if I may react quickly before we move to another item. I think, Mr. President, I was misunderstood. We precisely are loading the efforts of the minority to come up with a very substantial report that can really shed light on this matter, Mr. President. So, even if we're deluged with, no offense, to new-sounding terms as badges of good faith, which we have never read in my entire law study, there are badges of fraud and badges of bad faith, but not badges of good faith. We really laud the minority for this, and since our rules, Mr. President, would attribute, Mr. President, to RIDICS as a supplement to the existing Senate rules, Mr. President. I just like to quote this and make this part of the records. RIDICS would say that a minority report, and I quote, a so-called minority report of a committee is not in fact a report, but is the views of certain members of the committee. So it is not, in effect, a minority report separate from the majority report. It is an attachment, appendage, an annex to the majority report. So the minority report might conflict with majority report, but then again, the majority report will prevail, Mr. President. That's the parliamentary rule in all parliaments and congresses around the world, Mr. President. Just for the record, Mr. President.
Mr. President. Mr. President.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. President. It is a minority report, not a so-called minority report. Kahit pa i-annex nga siya sa committee report. The majority report will prevail. I guess in the end, Mr. President, the committee report will prevail as adopted or not by the plenary. And badges of good faith, Mr. President, good sponsor. With all due respect, the Supreme Court itself used the phrase badges of good faith in the September 2020 case of Madera versus Commission on Audit, in the October 2020 case of De Guzman versus Commission on Audit, and in the November 2020 case of SSS versus the Commission on Audit. Of course, Mr. President, these cases are quite new, so we should not fault the chair if he does not know of these new cases. Pero
I
wag
take
po
offense,
tayo-
Mr. President, to that attribution, Mr. President.
No, I apologize, Mr.
My lack
President.
of
No,
knowledge should not be implicated here.
No,
I have a law exam on Tuesday.
Yes,
so I'm
Mr.
still a law student right now. Perhaps Perhaps your staff are not the law students here.
Well,
So,
Mr. President, I am
move
not
that
a lawyer
that
myself.
phrase should be deleted from the records, Mr. President.
I have no
If there
objection
is
to
no,
deleting,
if there is
Mr.
an
President.
incumbent law student here, I am the one. I am the one. I challenge you.
1 minute.
I am
Whoever
apologize
is
to the good
whispering
chair. No
you,
offense,
they are
Mr.
probably not
President.
law students.
Yes, I am not even a lawyer, Mr.
We're
President.
suspended.
Motion to
Let us,
strike off
we'll
the
strike
record.
off the record that particular comment of our distinguished colleague from the minority. And,
Mr. President, if I
Yes,
may,
ma'am.
yes, I interpose no objection to striking it off the record. I'm sorry that I caused offense to the good chair. I just wish to assure Mr. President and the colleagues, no offense meant. I was simply saying that we should not fault anyone if not yet aware of these new facts. I just wanted to reassure there is legal basis for usage. But having said that, I did apologize to the chair for causing him offense, and I support the striking of the record of the words that meant no offense. Thank you, Mr. President.
thank you very much. Therefore,